Ray lived far out in the high desert, where the land rolled like waves made of sand, rock, and dry grass. He always believed that a quiet life was earned through years of hard work, and he had worked harder than most. His days were simple: wake with the sun, check the fences, water the horses, repair whatever needed fixing, and sit on his porch as the wind carried dust across the open plains. He liked silence. He liked the empty horizon. He liked knowing trouble rarely came this far. But the West had a habit of reminding men that trouble did not need an invitation. It came on its own terms. On one warm afternoon, Ray noticed something strange. His horse, usually calm, lifted its head sharply and snorted. Animals always felt danger before humans did. Ray shaded his eyes with his hand and looked toward the far ridge. At first, he saw nothing but heat waves twisting in the air. Then a thin pillar of dust rose, where no dust should have been. Riders. More than one. And, riding fast. Ray did not move. He just stood quietly, watching the dust grow taller and wider. Whoever they were coming straight toward his land. He had traded with nearby tribes before, exchanged water, food, cloth, and small supplies. Everything had always been peaceful, but something about the steady pace of these riders felt different. It wasn't a normal visit. When the riders finally came into clear view, Ray recognized them. They belonged to a tribe known for their discipline and strict way of life. The warriors rode tall, with their backs straight and their movements sharp, as if every action had meaning. Ray's horse stepped backward, uneasy. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. The group stopped a short distance from Ray's cabin. Their leader stepped forward first. He was older, with paint marking his cheeks and a feather tied into his braided hair. His face carried years of wisdom, but today his eyes held something heavier: worry, maybe even fear. Ray nodded politely. He was not a man who spoke more than necessary. The leader returned the nod and said they had come to talk. His voice was steady. But Ray noticed how the warriors behind him scanned the area, checking every corner, every shadow, every open space. They were not relaxed. They were preparing. Ray offered water and shade, the simple acts of hospitality he always gave visitors. But even while they accepted, no one lowered their guard. Ray started to feel a knot forming in his stomach. Something was happening. Something the leader hadn't said yet. The leader stepped aside and motioned toward someone standing behind the group. A tall warrior walked forward. He was young but carried the presence of someone trained from childhood. His arms were strong, his steps silent, and his expression unreadable. The paint on his face told Ray he was not a regular fighter. These were the markings of someone respected, someone with a reputation. The leader introduced him as their most skilled warrior, the one chosen to speak for the tribe in serious matters. Ray did not fully understand why such a skilled man was needed for a simple conversation. The warrior stared at Ray without blinking, as if measuring him silently. Ray had never felt so examined. As the afternoon passed, Ray noticed something else. The tribe was not just sitting near his cabin, they were spreading out. 2 men stood near his barn. Another pair rested near the water trough, but watched the road. Others scanned the horizon repeatedly. Ray realized it was not a peaceful visit. They were setting a perimeter. Ray Potterment. They were preparing for something they expected to happen. Ray tried to stay calm. He had lived long enough to know fear rarely helped anyone think clearly. He simply listened when the leader began talking again. The tribe needed help, he said. The drought had made hunting difficult. Streams were drying up. Their young and elders were suffering. They needed access to a hidden trail that led to safer land and better water. A trail only a handful of old ranchers still remembered. Ray was one of them. 17s. Ray understood the weight of those words. That trail was dangerous, narrow, and easy to ambush. Outsiders could use it to control the land if they ever learned it. The tribe said another group already knew about the drought and might try to take the trail for themselves. If that happened, the tribe's land and hunting grounds would be in great danger. Ray had sympathy for them. He had seen droughts ruin entire communities. Still, something didn't feel right. Why bring so many warriors for a discussion? Why bring their strongest fighter? Why surround his home? Why watch him so closely? The leader stepped back, and for the first time, the warrior spoke. His voice was firm, but not angry. He told Ray that the tribe needed him to guide them through the trail. They needed his knowledge, his experience, and his honesty. But his next words were sharper. He said refusing would bring consequences that Ray would not want to face. It was not shouted, it was not loud, but it was a threat, wrapped in calm words. Ray did not react. He simply looked at the warrior with steady eyes. He understood then that the tribe had not come asking, they had come expecting. They were prepared to push him if he did not agree. They did not trust outsiders. They believed force was the only way to secure help. As the sun began to drop behind the cliffs, the tribe settled around his land. Fires were lit. Horses were tied. No one left. Ray felt the weight of being surrounded. The warrior walked the edge of the property repeatedly, quiet as a shadow. Every time Ray looked up, the warrior was there, near the barn, behind a tree, beside the water trough, always watching. Ray tried to distract himself by feeding his horse and checking his tools. But he could not shake the feeling that something beyond the tribe's request was happening. When he looked out toward the canyon, he sensed movement far in the distance, shapes blending with the rocks. He couldn't be sure, but his instincts screamed a warning. He knew danger when he felt it. Later, when most of the tribe rested, Ray stepped to his porch and watched the sky turning dark. Coyotes cried in the distance. The air felt heavy, almost as if the land itself was waiting for something to break. The warrior approached him again, standing close enough to speak quietly. He said Ray had no choice. The tribe needed him at sunrise. They would travel the trail whether Ray cooperated or not. Ray didn't argue. He only nodded once, even though inside, he was troubled. He had never been forced into anything in his life. Yet tonight, he felt like he had been caught in a net he never saw coming. He could not sleep. He sat on the porch for hours while the tribe slept around his cabin. The fire crackled softly. The desert breeze carried dust across the ground. Ray's mind kept circling the same thought. This wasn't just a negotiation. This was a setup. A pressure he had never expected from people he had always respected. And deep inside, he sensed there was another danger, someone else watching from the shadows, waiting for the right moment. He felt the land listening, the night waiting, and the wind carrying warnings no one else seemed to notice. Ray understood then that the ambush had already begun. Not with arrows, not with a fight, but with fear, mistrust, and unspoken intentions. In the quiet darkness, he whispered to himself that dawn would bring answers he was not sure he wanted. Ray woke before the sun, long before the tribe stirred from their blankets. He had barely slept, yet his mind was sharper than ever. Something inside him whispered that today would decide everything, whether he lived in peace or got pulled into a storm he never wanted. The desert sky held a faint gray color, not fully morning but no longer night, and the cool air carried the smell of dust that had been disturbed during the evening. Ray saddled his horse quietly while the tribe prepared theirs. The warrior approached him again, the same calm, unreadable expression on his face. He didn't speak first this time. He simply stood beside Ray as the cowboy tightened the saddle strap. After a long silence, the warrior said the tribe would follow Ray through the hidden trail. It was not a question, nor a request. It was already decided. Ray just nodded. He had known since yesterday that arguing would make no difference. He mounted his horse while the tribe formed a line behind him, the leader at the center and the warrior near the front, close enough to watch Ray's every move. They started moving as the sky finally turned pale yellow and the first rays of light touched the canyon walls. The trail was not easy to find unless someone had traveled it many times. The ground was uneven, filled with loose stones and narrow paths that twisted through sharp ridges. Ray knew every inch of it. He had used it when he was younger to avoid dangerous groups or to find shelter during storms. Now, he led others through it for the first time, feeling a strange heaviness settle in his chest. As they moved deeper into the canyon, the air became cooler and the shadows longer. Ray studied the ground carefully. Every rock told a story. Every print meant something. That was when he saw it. A fresh track, too fresh to ignore. It wasn't from a horse belonging to the tribe. The pattern was wrong. It was wider, heavier. It belonged to someone else. Ray slowed his horse and pretended to look at the cliffs, just so he could think without showing alarm. His heart beat faster. He scanned the edges of the canyon walls and noticed dust marks high up on the ridge, like someone had climbed there recently. He also spotted a small reflection of light, too sharp to be sunlight bouncing off a rock. Something metallic. Something man-made. Before he could turn to warn the warrior, an arrow sliced through the air and hit the ground inches from his horse's hooves. The horse reared in fear. Ray held the reins tight, calming the animal with steady hands. Then, everything exploded around them. Arrows fell from the canyon walls, bouncing off rocks and sticking into the dry dirt. The tribe's horses screamed in panic. Men shouted and scrambled for cover. It was an ambush, but not by the tribe. These were the outsiders the leader had spoken about. They had followed the warriors to Ray's cabin the night before, hiding until the tribe left. They knew Ray would lead the tribe to the hidden trail, and they knew the trail was the perfect place to attack. Ray had seen many dangerous places, but the narrow canyon was one of the worst locations to be trapped. No easy escape, no open ground to run, just high walls and echoing danger. The warrior shouted orders in his language, trying to bring order to the chaos. He grabbed his spear and shielded the leader as arrows rained down. Ray knew he couldn't stay exposed. He jumped off his horse and pulled the warrior behind a large boulder just in time. Another arrow hit the rock and shattered into splinters. The warrior looked at Ray with surprise, not expecting the cowboy to save him. Ray didn't waste time. He whispered quickly that the attackers had taken the high ground. The tribe wouldn't last long if they stayed in the canyon. The warrior listened, breathing hard, his chest rising and falling as he tried to understand the situation fully. Ray pointed toward a narrow ledge higher up the canyon so thin it barely looked like a path. He had discovered it years before when he was tracking wild horses. No ordinary rider would notice it. The attackers surely didn't know it existed. Ray told the warrior that if they climbed up there, they could reach the ridge behind the attackers and surprise them. The warrior hesitated for only a moment, then nodded. He trusted Ray now, even if he didn't say it out loud. Together, they signaled the tribe to follow them. Ray led the way up the steep rocks, gripping cracks and small edges with practiced movements. The warrior came behind him, helping the others climb safely. It was a hard climb, and every few seconds arrows struck the canyon floor below. Ray breathed steadily, pushing his body harder than he had in years. The warrior stayed close, protecting those behind him. They finally reached the hidden ledge and carefully walked along it, moving toward the top of the ridge. When they reached the higher ground, Ray crouched low and peered over the edge. The attackers were below them, but focused on shooting downward, not expecting danger from behind. They were positioned in a tight formation, perfectly set up for the ambush. But now, they were vulnerable. Ray and the warrior looked at each other. This time, they shared understanding, not fear, not doubt, but agreement. Without needing more words, they moved. Ray pushed a large rock over the edge. It tumbled downward with speed, crashing into the attackers and scattering them. The warrior charged forward, shouting loudly to draw the tribe's attention. His voice echoed powerfully, giving courage to those still below. Some attackers tried to flee, others stumbled, and a few tried to fight back, but the sudden attack from above broke their strategy instantly. The tribe warriors below used the moment to push forward and gain ground. Dust filled the air as the clash continued, but the balance had shifted completely. After several tense minutes, the attackers finally retreated, disappearing across the ridge in scattered groups. Their ambush had failed. Silence spread slowly across the canyon, broken only by heavy breathing and the sound of horses calming down. The leader looked up at Ray and the warrior standing on the ridge. His eyes reflected relief and gratitude. Ray climbed down carefully, helping the wounded along the way. His clothes were dusty, his hands scraped, but he felt more alive than he had in years. The warrior met him halfway down and placed a firm hand on Ray's shoulder. His expression had changed completely. There was no suspicion now, no cold judgment, only respect. The warrior admitted that the tribe had come with mistrust. They had sent him to test Ray, to see whether he was someone they could depend on or someone they needed to pressure. They expected him to run away or refuse. They did not expect him to stand in danger for them. Because of him, they had survived today. Ray didn't smile, but his eyes softened. He told the warrior that no man should be left to face danger alone. In the West, survival depended on helping people, even when trust was fragile. The leader approached and thanked Ray deeply, promising that the tribe would never forget his actions. They offered him protection, friendship, and open trade for life. The warrior said he would return to visit as an equal, not as someone sent to test him. Ray accepted quietly. He did not need grand speeches or loud praise. He only needed to know that the land would be peaceful again. As he rode back toward his cabin, the sun was setting behind the cliffs, casting long shadows across the desert. The same wind that had carried warnings now felt softer. Ray looked over his land and felt something new. Something he had not felt in many years. Not fear. Not loneliness. It was the peaceful feeling of knowing that even in the Wild West, trust could be built in the most unexpected ways. And sometimes, the people who arrived with suspicion could leave as allies, perhaps even friends. Ray stepped onto his porch as the sky turned golden. For the first time in a long while, he felt he was exactly where he belonged.